Hey folks, JSAT here, and welcome to the third of three Today I Learns on how damage works in Vermintide 2. Today we're going to talk about the stagger system, and we're going to talk about the buff system. Now, I started doing work on this and making slides, and I didn't have much to say that hadn't been said excellently by Royal with Cheese already. So if you prefer to learn by reading, stop the video right now, go to the link, and read away. And if you have questions, you can hop on the Discord. That's also linked below. Cheese is always on there. I'm always on there. And a number of other knowledgeable folks. Just ask away. If you like to have somebody explain things to you, I'm going to explain it as I go through the guide. Okay? So, stagger system. It was introduced in 2.0. Basically, when you first hit an enemy, they take base damage. If you hit an enemy twice in a row, they take 1.2. You hit them 3 times in a row, they take 1.4, and all other times 1.4. But the devil's in the details with the stagger system, so I'm going to go over it step by step. So the first thing you need to know, and I think he talks about it here. Not really. So first thing you need to know is whether or not you actually get a stagger count against the enemy you're hitting. If you can't stagger the enemy, you can't get stagger damage, okay? With exceptions below I'll describe. If you headshot, or if you crit, or if you headshot crit, all of those things help you stagger, okay? If you hit them hard enough to stagger them, you will add 1 stagger count. If they already have a stagger count of 1 and you stagger them again, they get to a second stagger count. It tops off at 2. Certain very powerful moves, like literally pushing with your push ability, or certain powerful push attacks, and Fat Shark tells us if your attack is so strong it throws them over into the ground, you know it's a heavy type stagger, will give both stagger counts at once. So for example, Cheese suggests that you can implement pushes or add pushes to your regular anti-horde to add stagger counts of 2 to them. A thing to note is if you don't continue to stagger them, they will rapidly go back to a stagger count of 0. So, for example, if you, with a headshot crit on a Chaos Warrior, just managed to stagger him, and then you hit him again right thereafter, he will have a stagger count of 1, and you get the 1.2 modifier. However, if that next attack doesn't stagger them, your subsequent attack will not get any modifier because the Chaos Warrior will have already gone back down to a 0 stagger count. Okay, I think that that helps us with stagger. Just a couple notes. In general, monsters have much bigger stagger resistance than Chaos Warriors super armor type, which have bigger stagger resistance than Berserkers, which have bigger stagger resistance than armor, etc. Okay? So let's get on to the stagger talents. Now, Enhanced Power is not a stagger talent at all. It acts like a boost, and I'll explain how it works below. It's a liar. It's called Enhanced Power, but doesn't actually enhance your hero power. So ignore that. It's just a boost. It's just a buff. Okay. For ranged weapons, the first target hit will take 20% extra damage. It always counts as though it already has a stagger count of 1, even when it has a stagger count of 0. Or probably said more succinctly, even if the stagger count is 0, it takes 20%. If the stagger count is 1, it takes 20%. It can actually get the 40% modifier if it's got a stagger count of 2, and your stagger talent does not affect it at all. Where Smiter is available, Smiter is usually the best option. What Smiter does, the only thing it does, is if the first target you hit, if it isn't already staggered, still takes an extra 20% damage as though it does have a stagger count of 1. Okay? That's all it does. Assassin, while available, is almost always the best target. I can't think of an option where you would take something over Assassin. Assassin says if you headshot or crit, you get the 1.4 times modifier, even if the stagger count is 0, and that's all it says. Mainstay says if it has a stagger count of 1, you get a 1.4 modifier, 2, 1.6 modifier. Not often used. Bulwark acts in much the same way, but it works for the whole team if you provided the stagger. Okay, so these are much less common. Where available, these are the best, and on certain range heavy builds, you used Enhanced Power. That's really all there is to say about it. Okay. There's a little component, a little bit of more detail about how it works with weaves, but that's not important. Okay. And if you want a little more information on staggering that I may have missed, it doesn't look like I missed anything, but you can read Cheese's general words here. But Cheese also links a helpful but somewhat hard to read guide from a player named Arson that talks about opportunist and stagger breakpoints on kata, okay? Which will tell you whether or not you can get to that breakpoint. But the real importance in my mind of stagger breakpoints is, do you have the stagger breakpoint to interrupt the attack chains of the monk and the berserker? Okay, so enough. Let's talk about the last component. So we just talked about this component, the stagger component. It's much simpler than you think, right? The buff system is pretty simple. The buff system, it's not really a system, I'm calling it a system. What you do is you take all of these buffs that you can get, and you just ask yourself which of these are additive. In other words, which of these are grouped together. So for example, melee power, these 3 talents are additive if you happen somehow to have multiples of them. Else, they are multiplicative with everything else. Power versus, same thing. By the way, Hunter is just additive with weapon charm properties. For whatever reason, it's multiplicative with everything else here. Range power is another category. Power is another category. Everything that's said here under miscellaneous, most of it we covered before in a complicated way, okay? Headshot bonus damage, we've already covered. Crit bonus damage, these are not part of this system. These are not part of this system, so ignore. But what do? You find all of these things, you add up their individual components, you multiply them, you get one number, and that's it. So for example, if you had 10% versus chaos and 10% versus infantry, you get a 1.2. If you took enhanced hero power, which is a 7.5, now 7% multiplier, 1.075. And the last one could be something like you happen to be doing a ranged attack and you happen to get a 10% buff there, 1.1. You add those 3 components to get the 3 components, then you multiply them to get the overall 1.419 multiplier, and that gets shoved in this here for the total overall damage. Perhaps easier to do is simply to jump into the calculator as discussed before. Okay, I wanted to show a couple other little things on the calculator before we finish this up. Breakpoint analysis is excellent. Let's go to shutting infiltrate off. Shutting off strength potion. Let's go to realistic mode, right? Like we're just trying to kill some hordes, right? And when we're just trying to kill some hordes, we want to know if we're going to one-shot or two-shot something, right? So we're playing Shade, so we're obviously going to turn on Assassin, which is excellent on Shade. This tells us how much we need to do to get a certain attack that's either a body shot, headshot, crit, or crit headshot to a 1. So I only need 8.7% more damage to get this to a 1-shot. I need 44% to get a body shot, excuse me, a headshot on Fanatics to a 1-shot. And this says I need like a lot. Okay? So let's be more realistic though. Let's turn on Cruelty, which is a 50% crit damage that almost everybody runs. Now how close are we? Ooh, that's a lot of good stuff. So I'm within 15% of getting a crit body shot versus Fanatics. 23% versus Clan Rats. Is that okay? So how do I make up that last 20%? A couple things could happen, right? One option is I could try to dump some more crit power on this by stacking 2 crit power properties. Does that get me there? Gets me there for Fanatics. It still doesn't get me there for Clan Rats. Okay, so maybe I don't want to do that. What's 10% infantry do with me? 10% infantry is multiplicative with everything we've seen so far. So that should just be a straight 10%. So it should make it for Ungors, but not for Fanatics. Or excuse me, for this, it should make it for this, and it should not make it for either of these. Fair enough? Do you get the idea? So this is where you can start playing with and asking yourself the question, should I have infantry? Should I have chaos? Should I have crit power? Etc., etc. Anyways, I hope this has been useful. It's been a lot of work. If you have questions, I'll see you on the Discord. Otherwise, be good, everybody.